Hello, everyone, and welcome to my recap of Game 5 of my tournament at WOSC in Barcelona that I played over the summer. So, if you've been following the channel and my other recaps, I started the tournament 4-0. So unfortunately, the very beginning, remember like a decent chunk of the beginning of this video got a little bit messed up. The tables are relatively close together, and you always have people walking behind you, so my tripod got a little bumped and it's a little bit crooked. Luckily, one of the tournament organizers came and fixed the camera for me in the middle of the game. If you're watching this, thank you so much for fixing the camera. And so we'll be able to pick up some of the live footage, about a third of the way through the game. So yeah, let's get started. So again, I'm Sente in this game. I went ahead and played my standard static rook opening, and my opponent played a very, very normal fourth file rook opening to start this game. Here was the first time I was like, a little bit strange. Not completely out of the ordinary. Generally, people would move their king first, maybe bring the silver up to 4-3 first, or push their edge pawn first. But this is something that's completely viable, and also it's a strategy that you would employ if you want to go, or the move that you would play if you want to go for something like a Fuji system, right? So the Fuji system idea is to prevent your static rook opponent from castling into Anaguma. But then he played pawn 7-4, and I was sitting there thinking, is this how Fuji system plays? I thought maybe, okay, I guess so in a way, right? So like normally what Fuji's system is going to do is want to push the edge pawn this way, and then push this if I'm going into Anaguma. But he pushed 7-4 right away. And so I thought, well, maybe he's just got the move order a little bit kind of mixed up. And maybe this is a move he's going to want to play at some point anyway, so it's okay. But I'm not going to play Anaguma. I kind of wanted to try and transpose back into my prep, which is the sugar line, as I call it, which is knight jump to 3-7 and then push the fourth file pawn. And so I pushed my edge pawn from my side of the board, kind of trying to signal to my opponent, hey, I'm not going for Anaguma. But my opponent actually ended up not caring that I'm not going for Anaguma because he just brought his silver up. So at this point, I know this is something strange. It is not Fuji system. But I was looking at it and I had no idea what the heck it was. I've never seen this move before in this structure where you go to fourth file rook and then try and attack with the silver on the other side of the board. So yeah, I was just like, okay, maybe he has a weird castle in mind, like a right side Yagura or something. Okay, let me just like see what's going on. I'm just gonna bring my gold into the game, and no, he's not castling. He's attacking. So I think on this move, I spent quite a bit of time, maybe something on the order of like 10 minutes of my initial 45 minutes starting time I spent on this move. Because I'm trying to figure out, okay, what is he going to... Okay, obviously he's going to do this somehow. And my thinking was he probably wants to do this and this somehow, right? Maybe also bringing this. I thought that was but it felt weird. Like, why... He doesn't need to do this in order to put his rook on the seventh file. So I guess maybe there's some setup where this is viable against certain setups here, whereas it's not if I go for a Yagura immediately. Yeah, I'm really not sure what the idea behind the opening is, other than that I was pretty sure he was going to try and attack me on the seventh file. So the answer I came up with is to put my bishop on 9-7. So okay, if we move it back, Engine again is not afraid. It just wants pawn to 5-6. I'm gonna be honest, I don't understand the point of this move. I guess probably it wants to do this and get all of the pieces into the defense. But yeah, this move did not even enter my consciousness. Here, I was just trying to think, how do I defend? Or do I want to defend this, and how do I defend it? I decided I did, mainly because I didn't like the idea of trading these pawns. I can't get any general pieces up here, and so my defense would effectively be to drop a pawn back all the way on 7-7, and that blocks my bishop in. So that's what I didn't like about just allowing the trade. And so I decided, okay, let me go ahead and put the bishop on the edge. He did not answer my edge pawn push with his pawn, and so he actually is going to take a few moves to get up here, so it's fine for me to put here, and I can actually end up moving it up here if need be. Okay, he goes ahead and brings the rook back, and I'm like, okay, here we go, it's coming, because at this point I can't prevent the pawn trade, right? And so what I decided to do, okay, let me go ahead and get this silver in the game. I didn't want to go this way because pawn push opens up the bishop line completely, so I wanted to put my silver on this side of the king to block that. Even here, the engine wants to just bring the bishop up immediately. Okay, I decided to block, and then my opponent decided to try and go for the edge. I thought it was a little bit of a weird order. I felt like maybe you want to go to the edge immediately, but then I go ahead and get my bishop out of the way. What this allows, though, is that now when we make this pawn trade, the silver is going to be hitting the bishop. But I had a plan for that, which is to move the bishop back all the way to 6-8. Yeah, so this is what I saw, when I took that 10-minute think, is if I didn't do this, then my bishop gets stuck on 8-8 for the rest of the game, because I have to drop a pawn. I felt like I had to drop a pawn back on 7-7. I could have been wrong, right? And you wanted to do this. But if I get my bishop over here, I'll be able to push this pawn to 5-6 later, and then my bishop can work this way, right? Or even this way. And so I thought this was kind of a clever way to deal with the pawn trade, enable me to drop a pawn back on 7-7 without blocking my bishop in. So that I was like, I got to here and I was like, okay, like this looks kind of okay. Like I don't actually know what my opponent's plan is going to be from here. And he took a really long think in that position and came up with pawn to 3-5. I'm going to be completely honest. I still don't know what the point of this move was. I was really confused that he spent 10 minutes thinking and made this move. Because really it just loses a pawn. And I don't think my pawn being on 3-5 is good for him. If anything, now my pawn can go to 3-4 and it's going to attack his bishop. So yeah, I still don't really understand this move. The only thing that I could come up with at the time was I did want this, and he wanted to prevent that, and he wanted to put my pawn on 3-5 to block a potential bishop exchange on this file or something. But yeah, I'm gonna be honest, I was confused. Anyway, my opponent goes ahead and opens up the bishop diagonal. So here I also thought quite a bit, because I could drop a pawn immediately to block. But I thought this bishop sack wasn't actually that good. I thought I could deal with it, and it was just good for me. Like, there's not actually an attack after this bishop sack, at least in this position. Yep, so I decided, okay, time to go ahead with my plan. Let me activate my bishop towards the right side of the board. And I guess, like, yeah, okay, when you look at it here, this pawn kind of is in the way, but, like, I'm going to get this with tempo, and then, either this or this, right? So, anyway, my opponent went ahead and floated his rook. So, this goes ahead and protects from this pawn push, and it lets him jump the knight without blocking his rook in. So, nice move from my opponent here. And here I went ahead and jumped my knight. My calculation is I want to take your pawn and hit your bishop and threaten knight takes on 5-3, which forks your golds. Like this felt good. This move felt good. I'm like, oof, man, this is a nice knight jump, right? For example, like if you do the natural thing, which seems to be dropping the pawn, I get to just like jump this knight immediately. So instead, my opponent just ignores it and jumps his knight. This also caught me by surprise. I thought he would defend it somehow, like maybe like rook over. Maybe sack and then drop it. So I wasn't really sure what he was gonna do. But this felt like it's just letting me take, so I took. Basically this knight move and this knight move aren't direct threats. So I thought I could just deal with it if he did it, right? And this is hitting the bishop and is threatening this. This is just like a much bigger threat than either of these knight moves. And actually, technically, I forgot, the recording is fixed, I believe, right around this move. So I think from here, we can go to the live recording. Yeah, so this is like, I think, technically 2 moves, right? He jumped this knight. I went ahead and took the pawn. And my opponent has a decision here. I mean, he has to move the bishop in one way or another. If he moves the bishop back, I can push the pawn on the second file. Or even, okay. I know I just came over here, but let's actually analyze because it's actually important, right? So if my opponent moves the bishop, let's say this way, or this way really, I get knight on 5-3 unpromote. He can't allow that. That's way too good. So either he needs to come back this way or this way to defend 5-3 with the bishop. Engine likes this the best. I think what my opponent, and this, to me, this also feels wrong, slash not really like the point of the strategy that my opponent went for, which is to use this bishop diagonal, right? So to me, it makes sense that he came up to 4-4. Obviously, the downside of going to 4-4 is that it allows pawn to 2-4 at some point. If I decide, I can't actually remember exactly what I played. So those are kind of like the decisions he had, right? He can't allow the knight, so he has to come either to 4-2 or to 4-4. So yeah, the trade-off, again, with going to 4-4 is that I get to push a pawn to 2-4. So I'm pretty sure that is what I ended up doing. I'm just not 100% sure. And that is the main downside. Yep, that downside to this move, because now the rook is not defending, and the bishop isn't defending there either. So he ignores it and goes ahead and jumps the knight. I went ahead and thought, okay, I need to go ahead and defend and drop the bishop or drop the pawn so that my opponent can't drop a pawn on my king's head. Now, we're going to go ahead and check the engine because the engine thinks I'm a doofus. It thinks that this is actually a pretty big mistake and is not scared at all of this attack. It just wants to take on 2-3. And this threat is much bigger than this threat, because this threat, I mean, I can just run. He has nothing to put here. And I'm not actually risking any pieces that can even be dropped to 7-8, right? I mean, he can maybe run or something, but I mean, I can play very, very slow and be completely fine here. Engine finds bishop 4-6 is what it wanted. Bishop 4-6. It wants rook 2-4. Not gonna lie, don't understand that move. What is the point of that? Even this move, it's like, okay, like, is that really the threat? Like, he's attacking. But yeah, I think this attack just looks way scarier than it actually is. This silver is all it's actually doing in this position is blocking the rook. And he doesn't have anything to drop here. The knight is blocked by the pawn now. And the bishop is blocked by the pawn now. So he actually doesn't have anything here. So actually, I don't need to be scared of this pawn at all. Now, Engine is even less afraid. It's just going to take. And I thought this would just enable a bunch of trades. But what ends up happening actually is, again, this silver is actually all it's doing is blocking the rook. If the silver actually was like over here somehow or over here somehow, it would be a bit scarier. But even here, like a knight drop, apparently not scary. I'm just going to take the bishop. Discovered check. Okay, I can just drop the pawn. Okay, wait, that's not what it wants to do. 7-6. What? Okay, so apparently there's a gigantic difference if I drop it here instead, because if the rook takes... What? Then I run. So that must mean that in this position I can also run and it's fine. Yeah. He can't take the bishop. So if I run here, he can take the bishop. But if I drop the pawn and he takes the bishop, I don't even take this silver, I take this silver, apparently. And this is completely winning. The attack is completely dead, right? So if he wants to continue with the attack, now I can run because my bishop is not under threat anymore. Engine just is not afraid. Okay. Anyway, so apparently just attacking, letting my opponent try to attack, was going to be completely fine. The attack doesn't work. But yeah, I defended. Ironically, my defense actually made his attack a bit faster, because what my opponent does is drop the pawn, and now when I have to recapture, I can't let him take. Well, apparently, again, Engine actually thinks I can let him take. But when I do this and then drop the pawn again, all I did, I basically just let him play silver to 7-6 for free and get the silver into the attack. And I didn't get to promote my pawn. So like once I get to here, it's like obvious I did something wrong, because it just gave him moves for free, right? So yeah, we can go ahead and watch the moves live now. So yeah, like it's just amazing sometimes how strong the engine is at really being able to see through attacks that don't actually work. So yeah, okay, here I decided to recapture the pawn. Again, apparently, right, this is apparently a mistake. I needed to take on 2-3 this whole time. Now I go ahead and drop the pawn here to defend. And my idea was I thought the trades were in my favor, actually. I thought the trades don't work, and that the attack runs out of steam. And so I was like, okay, bring the attack on. I thought, in fact, he would need to retreat the silver, but that's not what he did. And I think the engine actually does want to do the attack because he gets to now trade relatively evenly, weaken my king, and then try and kind of recoup for a second attack, is what the engine ends up wanting to do. This was another misread by me in these positions. So as these trades are happening, you might have noticed that I was not recapturing with my knight here, right? So I could capture with the knight. It's the lowest piece, generally speaking. You want to like trade off your lowest pieces, lowest value pieces first. And that's what the engine wants to do. The engine just wants to trade off. And like my thinking about why I didn't want to do this is that, for example, if you trade off all the pieces and then drop the knight, for example, the bishop is pinned. So like it can't move, and this knight that I gave him is guaranteed to get a trade for a better piece later on. But again, though, interestingly enough, the engine doesn't care. It says I can just drop. If the rook takes, you can just drop a silver, and it's defended. Very interesting. Yeah, I didn't see that, obviously. Makes sense now that you get to here. But yeah, this is my idea. This is why I did not want to give him another knight, which is that I thought it gave him another piece trade later on. So yeah, instead I was recapturing with my other pieces, and then I was expecting this, and then I was going to be able to take with knight at the end, and then my opponent would be forced to maybe like drop a pawn, and then I would deal with it then. That was kind of my thinking. It turns out it was dead wrong. You can see like this is the position that I saw, and it's not good for me, minus 2.5. And obviously the most, it's only move to keep the advantage, but literally the most obvious move in the entire position. And so, but luckily for me, this is not what happened. This is not what happened. So in this position, my opponent decided to take with the rook instead of the bishop, and I was surprised. Initially, I was surprised and thought, oh no, maybe I missed something. And my main idea that I thought I had missed in this rook variation is something along the lines of, now when the pawn is here, he's threatening this, and now I can't run, right? And even if I run here, I can't run. And I'm assuming this is what my opponent calculated. Right now I have to come back up the board. But I guess, you know, in the end, like coming back up the board is not that bad. I do have a lot of room to run here. But maybe like a night drop to prevent this. But yeah, okay, it's still safe. But yeah, like I think this is what my opponent was thinking, and this is what I initially thought when I saw this, and I was a little bit scared. But I found a nice move in this position. Not the best move, but it worked. And the idea here is that while the pawn can take my knight, it's not check, and I get to block the bishop. And this blocks it while also threatening to take back the bishop. So that's why I made this move now. The engine likes knight drop on 5/5 better, and I'm assuming, okay, yeah, like cuts off the escape square. This is check. You know, in some world, maybe there's like, you know, maybe there's like a rook drop, which blocks this, and then this is actually a mate even. So I can see kind of why it went. And also, like, now, like, if the bishop takes it, it's just a knight instead of a silver, right? And actually, this type of move, right? So I ended up dropping the silver. Engine wants to drop the knight that thinks the evaluations are at least close, but the knight is better. And this is actually why the engine prefers taking with the bishop. Because when you take with the bishop and recapture, drop the pawn, I can't block the rook. It just takes. I can drop a silver, but still the rook sees all the way to 7/7, and the coordination between this rook and this pawn on 7/7 is just not stoppable. So this is why the engine prefers taking with the bishop instead of with the rook. Okay, but my opponent took with the rook, right? I went ahead and took back, and he dropped the pawn, and then I went ahead and dropped this silver. So I'm pretty happy with this move. I will say, you know, just like this type of move actually comes up quite often, I think, where, you know, you drop a piece on 5/5 supported by a pawn to block your opponent's bishop. So keep it in mind in your games. So here, of course, I'm gonna lose the knight, but my opponent's bishop is now completely out of the game. My opponent goes ahead and drops this pawn here. I was like, okay, again, I don't want to try and retreat and let him drop a piece in, so I'm going to just take it. Now he's out of pawns. Here, my opponent sacks the bishop. I think this wasn't the best move. It's not the move I was expecting at all. There was a move that I was a bit afraid of in this position. After pawn drops and takes. The move I was afraid of was bishop drop on 8/8, and it happens to be the engine's top move. Although I'm surprised to see the evaluation is still in my favor. I thought with this move I was in a bit of trouble because now my king's not going to be able to run. If I do something like pawn drop, I thought even like silver or something, and then I take, and now I really like, basically no matter what I do, he can prevent me from coming back this way, and he's got this lance, he can bring the gold to block this square, and I was like, I don't know exactly what's going on. There's not a mate, it's not a threat mate, but this looks really scary. And so I really was hoping my opponent would not play this move. I was trying my hardest to try and figure out what's going on in this position. Now engine's not afraid. Engine says take, even here, pawn again. It's like, what? Like, I can't run and all this is scary, but apparently, yeah, you just end up running up the board, essentially. And here, like, silver has to take. Silver 7/7, like silver, like I can run back. There's not enough pieces here. I can take. Like, this isn't that. This apparently isn't mate. Even though this is super scary. Right? And this is apparently enough for mate for me. Yeah, so like I did not. I would like. I think by now we're very close to both being in Byoyomi, if not already in it. I know my opponent was definitely in Byoyomi already. So yeah, I was very not sure slash afraid of what the heck happens when my opponent drops a bishop on 8-8. Now my opponent decided to sack the bishop first, and obviously the difference between this and then potentially dropping bishop 8-8 after is that in this position you haven't made a horse. You're like a whole move behind because you initiated this trade instead of dropping the bishop, making me take the bishop with my silver and then getting to promote the bishop back. So yeah, my opponent took the silver. I'm going to take back. And so here I'm like, okay, I'm fine. Like, I'm going to win this game. It's a little bit dicey, but I think I'm going to be able to run. I'm going to be fine, right? And I ran my king, and then my opponent really surprised me with this bishop move. And it's just a complete blunder. You know, at first I was, because it's kind of along the same lines of bishop drop 8-8, which is the one I was afraid of. And he played it on 7-7 instead, and I was just like, can I not just take it? And actually, I mean, you're going to see me in the video lean way, and I'm like, what? I actually think I let out an audible gasp, like, what? And obviously he's like, oh, shut. And now, like, this position is completely, really unlosable. Unlosable position. I mean, okay, my opponent goes ahead, jumps the knight. I'm just going to go ahead and run the king. It's fine. I can trade it for silver. And there's really just, my opponent has no real threats in this position. He just doesn't have enough pieces. And honestly, I thought he would resign after he blundered, after he made that bishop drop blunder. And I think it would be completely appropriate to resign there. Now, my opponent keeps playing, which is completely his prerogative, obviously. And, you know, sometimes people mess up, right? I thought in this position, it's though, like, it is almost impossible to mess up. And so my opponent plays this silver drop, and then I played this bishop drop with check. So, okay, like, probably like the last couple spots of analysis here. Basically, my opponent's threatening two things in this position. The main threat is to just drop a silver directly to 3-7, forking my king and the rook. And the other threat is to take this knight and then drop it here to fork my king and rook. So really, all of my opponent's threats are king rook forks. My initial idea in this position, well, what if I just run? Well, actually, the silver drop is still a fork. And I was like, crap. Because if he didn't have the silver, I can go here, and now he can't take this because it's pinned to this. And even if he, you know, like moves this back and then takes, if my rook's over here, there's no knight fork anymore. So here I was like, oh my god, like he still has this annoying threat. Like, how do I stop it? Like, okay, like if I really want, I could have played something like this, and then after he takes, move something like that. But what I decided to do is to give a check with the bishop. And my thinking here was, okay, the most obvious thing to do is drop this silver. But if he drops the silver, he can't drop it here. It's the only piece he has. So now I could go ahead and take the lance. And this is actually what ended up happening. I thought, you know, the threat, obviously, you know, the bigger threat, I think, is to go like this way to preserve this silver drop. But as you can see, the engine just thinks that this is Hishi. Knight takes on 5-3 promote. Obviously, it's pinned, and if the gold takes this way, it's a mate. And then if the silver drops, I can just run the king, and you don't have time to take the rook. I mean, I was probably not going to do that. Okay, I was definitely not going to play that. I was going to play something like this, which is, I mean, the engine also thinks that this is completely fine. And then, like, if the king ran, like, I was thinking, like, there's got to be something here. That was kind of my level of analysis. Shoot, bug. There's got to be something here that I can do. Now, I might have gotten here and been kind of afraid. Not exactly sure what's going on in this position. But okay, sure, I can even do this, right? this, I probably when I get to here, I would probably find something like this, right? Um, but yeah, like that wasn't plan A when I dropped this. Plan A was to make him drop the silver, and then I can take the lance. And that's actually exactly what ended up happening. So I felt pretty clever here. Okay, I forced him to drop. Now he has no pieces. He has no attack. I'm completely fine. I even get to take the lance. And here, my opponent goes ahead and takes the knight. And so now all I have to do is watch out for that knight drop that forks my pieces. So I went ahead and made that move that I wanted to make before. It hits the silver. He sees it and retreats the silver. Here I go ahead. Finally, after all this time, I finally make the move that the engine wanted, which is pawn takes on 2-3 with promote. And my opponent goes ahead and runs his silver. And here's where the disaster happens, guys. It's an absolute disaster. So what I was thinking here is, when his silver ran back, I'm like, oh, it's in Gimbasami, right? So the pawns are on the sides of the silver, and so the silver can't run. Okay, great. So I wanted to push my pawn, and I'll be able to capture the silver. And I think right around there, you saw my hand move. I was like, oh, wait a minute. If I do that, the silver gets to actually run to 5-4. It's not that good of a move. Now, obviously, silver runs up the board. It doesn't freaking matter, right? I'm going to pause it right here. It doesn't matter if the silver runs up the board. It's still completely winning. He has no attack, even if the silver runs up the board. And so I probably should have just made the move and just dealt with it, right? And I think this whole time, what I was thinking was the only way for me to lose this game is if I try and attack my opponent, I give him too many pieces, and I mess up the attack, right? So that's what I was trying to, how can I attack without giving him any pieces? And that's why I liked the idea of this pawn drop, or pawn push. But I saw it didn't work from the perspective of it didn't capture the silver, so I started panicking a bit. I needed to find another move, and I just couldn't find an easy one. Now, there's many moves, right? Like pawn drop on 2-2 or 8-8 or whatever that is. The bishop drop on 1-5. Like rook drop even on, what would that be? Like 2-9 or 8-9 or again, I can't remember. But I panicked here, and I made this move, pawn drop, and you can actually see it on the clock, and my opponent points it immediately. I flagged. And so I ended up losing this game. Now, initially, I thought I didn't quite understand what was going on because his clock is still running. You can see it. And I was like, what do you mean? Your clock's still running. Make your freaking move. But yeah, apparently that means I flagged. And it was a disaster, obviously. To lose in that position. And actually, I'm gonna show in the shogi how unlosable of a position this is. Oops. Yeah. So here's, I went through this position, and I tried to find the worst possible move. Right. And so like, okay, maybe I can come up with a king, and nope, still plus 40. Okay, let me think. Maybe I sack the rook. It's still plus 20. Because my opponent takes, I can just retake. Okay, what if I do something really dumb and I just sack the rook? Still plus 11. Literally the worst. This is the worst evaluation I could possibly find out of any move in the entire position. Is plus 11 still for me, with me just sacking off a rook. So literally in this, all I needed to do was make a move. Like any move, and I'm fine. Okay, like this would complicate things quite a bit. Obviously, I would never play this move. But yeah, I mean, I could have just done this. I could have done this. I could have any move here, right? And now, obviously, I shouldn't flag in this position. I should be aware of the time. So this is not an excuse. My only reasoning, I was trying to figure out what happened, is these chess clocks and how they do the sound when you're in like byoyomi at the end is a little bit different than how shogi clocks work. And I think if you play on 81 Dojo, you'd be familiar with like the countdown that happens. It almost always in Japanese starts with 10 seconds, right? So it's announced you have 10 seconds left, and then there's a count. Ich, ni, san, chi, da, 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 all the way to 10. And with a lot of shogi clocks, basically what happens is the beeping starts at 10 seconds. It's like beep, beep, beep. It gets down to 5 seconds, and then from 5 seconds down, it's just a long beep for 5 seconds. And so that's kind of what I'm used to is, okay, I hear the beep, I have 5 seconds. So as long as I start making my move when the long beep happens, I'm fine. I have 5 seconds to make the move and hit the clock. But actually, these are not shogi clocks, these are chess clocks. And the way that these chess clocks did the sound is it starts beeping at 5 seconds, and then it does a long beep for the last 1 second. And that's essentially why I ended up flagging. I think even if the long beep was 2 seconds, I would have been fine, but the long beep was only 1 second. And yeah, so I ended up flagging in this literally unlosable position. And I lost my first game at WOSC, at least in the main tournament. Obviously, I lost in the team tournament and some in the Blitz. But yeah, this was a very painful loss. I was not happy, especially because, like, you know, and I shouldn't have thought this, obviously. And, you know, it's completely within my opponent's rights not to resign. But I was expecting him to resign. I was like, why are you wasting our time? Well, yeah, this is why he's wasting our time, because I flagged. So yeah, and I think it did affect me for the rest of the tournament, at least in a little bit. Now, I did at least an okay job keeping my spirits up, because I felt like, okay, like I played a great game. Like I made the right moves on the board, and I made just a very silly, like, beginner mistake, or, you know, chalk it up to inexperience, because I haven't played that much over the board with clocks. So yeah, obviously lesson learned. Next time, you know, especially in a position like this where it literally doesn't matter what move you're making, just make a move at 10 seconds, right? Like, just look at the clock, make a move at 10 seconds. Or even, like, you know, now that I know how the chess clocks work, if I'm playing with the chess clocks, and if you ever play with these chess clocks in Europe, just make a move as soon as you hear it making any noise, right? Because then it's about the same as how the long beep works. So yeah, painful loss. My next game, actually, somehow, after I lost this game, ends up being the highest rated player I played. I actually got to play on stage on one of the top 6 boards. I don't exactly know how that works and why it works that way. And I'm pretty sure it shouldn't. And so that's part of, like, the slight complaint that I had about the tournament format and stuff that I went over in my WOSC versus US Shogi Championship video, if you want to take a look at that. So yeah, look forward to that one. I promise you, in that game, I do not flag, and I do not flag in any of the rest of these games. So yeah, thanks for watching. It's still really painful watching this game back. See you next time.